So today we're going to take a look at how federalism fits into the overall scheme of power between state and local governments and the national government. And there are three basic models that we use when we talk about the relationships between states, landers, or whatever they might be called, provinces, and their national governments. And we'll try to put them into perspective. So the first thing we're going to start off taking a look at is the idea of a unitary system. And what we're going to do in each one of these is assume that these are all democracies in which the people have some say over the way that their money is spent and some say over who their elected representatives are. So we'll start here with the people up at the top, and then we'll have what we can call the national government, and then we can have what we call the states or the local governments or whatever they may be in that situation. So in a unitary system of government, what we have is basically all power resides within the form of the national government. There's very little power or independent power delegated to the states to be able to make their own individual decisions about policy and spending. So we would start here with a system in which basically take that line away, and most of the power in this system flows between the people and the national government. So you elect members of your national government, and then you also pay taxes to that national government. And that national government then makes the laws that are carried out by the states. And really what we have here is the relationship where the national government controls the states. In some really, really serious uniform systems, the people might actually be appointed at the state level or the local level by the national government. And then there's no real direct relationship between the states and the people other than kind of service provision. And, France is a pretty good example of a unitary system of government. I once experienced, the United Kingdom's become much more devolved over the last several decades, but I once experienced a little bit about what a unitary system is like. I was coming back from a conference in India and had a layover in London for a couple of days, and having just been at a federalism conference, everybody said, hey, you got to go see Parliament in action. It's in the evenings. So I was bone dead tired from the trip, run up into the steps of Parliament and got to hear them talk, and what were they talking about, which is something completely alien to an American, is here we have the national government talking about regulating the size of hedges in people's yards. I thought to myself, wow, what a great example of what happens when the national government basically has all power to make most legislation. Because in the United States, that probably wouldn't even be a state issue. In most areas, it's regulated by local governments. Why? Because does the national government really need to be involved in regulating the sizes of the hedges? Probably not in a large country like the United States. So the unitary system, has power that focuses mostly on the national government, and the national government has the ability to be able to abolish the units of government underneath it. Now, kind of opposite of that is confederation or confederal government. And what we see here, again, we'll start off with the people, this being a democracy, and then we'll start off with the national government and the states. And usually in a confederation, what happens is most all the power in relationship to the people and their government goes back to the people and their states. So again, they elect their representatives to their states, they pay taxes to their states, and that's really the only large relationship they have. And then the states usually nominate or send people to the national government, and they also send money to the national government as well. And in confederations, they prove to be fairly unstable. If you take a look at American history under the Articles of Confederation, the states had far too much power, and we ended up changing our system of government in 1787 because of that. Now, we don't have a whole lot of governments that function under the system of confederations right now, but you could make the argument that there are a lot of international organizations that involve governments that are confederations. For example, the United Nations, right? As Americans, we elect our members, the presidency and the United States Senate, and then our representative or our ambassador to the United Nations is then chosen by the president and confirmed by the Senate and then sent over to the United Nations. Additionally, we don't pay direct taxes on April 15th to the United Nations. Rather, Congress and the president with their spending powers decide how much money they're going to allocate to the United Nations, and we don't really have much choice in that. Right? So Confederation is inherently unstable because a lot of the power is given to the states, and states oftentimes disagree with what the national government does, and particularly if they're wealthy states that can pull out and they have the power to destroy the national government the same way states can be rewritten in a unitary system of government. The last system of government, which is what we currently have in the United States, is our federal system of government, which really is an attempt to be able to, I don't want to say merge the unitary and confederal systems, but give much more power to every area of government in the United States to allow people to have the most choices as to who they're going to take a look at for their policy making. So again, let's start out here with our national and our state and our people. As we know, we have direct relationships with both our national and our state governments in the U.S. Every 2 years, we hold national elections for the U.S. House of Representatives and 1/3 of the senators. Every 4 years, we have a presidential election. So we know that we directly, or through the Electoral College indirectly, elect our members of the federal government. We also pay taxes every April 15th to the federal government and through other sources of taxes that might be there as well. We also, however, elect our members of the state governments. So most state governments elect their governors every 4 years, and the state legislatures, usually terms are between 2 and 4 years, depending on whether they're in the House or the Senate. So, in most even years in most states, we also have state elections, and that sends policy signals to what we want from those public officials. In addition to that, we also pay taxes to our state government. So that same day on April 15th, when you're scrambling to be able to put together your package to send out your federal taxes, as soon as you're done with that, you're like, oh, and all of a sudden on TurboTax or whatever you use, they're like, what state do you live in? Let's fill out that state taxes as well. So they vary by state. Some states are relatively high. It gets up to like 12% in California. Pennsylvania is 3.08% of your income tax. We have sales taxes. So in Pennsylvania, we have a 6% sales tax, same in Jersey. So we pay taxes directly to them. Now, what the interesting thing is down here at the bottom is, in our federal system of government, instead of having one government being dominant, like in the unitary system, the national government is dominant, in the confederal system, the states are dominant, we have a system of government in which essentially both the states and the national government exist side by side. And there's always a certain amount of tension to them in the ways in which they want to exercise their power, right? So what we see is that the national government really has a whole lot of money, right? Since the 16th Amendment, they encourage the states to do stuff by shifting money over towards them. And then in many respects, it's up to the state governments to implement a lot of federal programs. So without each other, they couldn't really function together. The federal government provides a lot of the money, state government provides a lot of the infrastructure and personnel to be able to carry out a lot of what the national government does. Now, what's interesting here as well is states can fight back to the national government, and the national government's got tools that they can use to be able to fight back against the states. But what we don't see is that neither can abolish each other. So we have a perpetual union in the United States that until we decide to end this union, the federal government can't, merge states together or split them up. States can't decide that they want to leave the union. We saw that with the Civil War and Texas versus White, which we'll talk about at another time. So the federal system is really interesting because we've got two sovereign sets of governments, the national government and the state governments. They both have their own power. They both have their own constitutions, which give us rights. And at the same time, it's almost like us having dual citizenship living in a federal country. And that power sharing differs from federal nation to federal nation. In the United States, we have a fairly in between centralized versus decentralized federal system. But this is the basic overview, the types of governments we have and the ideas of federalism.